So let's talk about Thanksgiving. It's one of America's most iconic holidays, right? But today we're going to dig a little deeper, get past the turkey and the pilgrim hats, and really understand what this day is all about. The true story might actually surprise you.
All right, let's just jump right in. When I say Thanksgiving, what's the first thing that pops into your head? For most of us, it's probably a big meal with family, maybe some football on TV, the parade. You know the scene. It's this classic American image, but is it the whole story? Well, we're about to find out it's way more complicated than that. Okay, so let's start with the story we all know. You know, the one we learned in elementary school, with the drawings of a nice, peaceful meal shared between the Pilgrims and Native Americans.
Yeah, this is the one. The Pilgrims, after a really brutal first winter, finally have a good harvest. So to celebrate, they invite their new Wampanoag neighbors over for a big 3-day feast. It's a tale of cooperation, of gratitude, a really nice founding story. But as we're about to see, that's where the simple version of the story kind of stops. Because that simple, feel-good story, well, it papers over a much, much more complex and, frankly, often painful reality. So let's pull back the curtain and see what the historical record really shows. Whoa. Okay, when you see it laid out like this, side by side, the contrast is pretty stark, isn't it? That friendly dinner invitation, it was actually a political meeting, a strategic alliance. And calling it the first Thanksgiving? Nope. That name came about like 200 years later. And the whole peaceful welcome thing, it came after the Wampanoag people had already suffered through a century of violent encounters and a devastating plague brought by Europeans.
And if you look at it from the Wampanoag point of view, the whole story just flips on its head. Their leader, Osameka Delkin, was in a really tough spot. An epidemic had just wiped out a huge part of his people, leaving them incredibly vulnerable. So he sees these English settlers with their guns, not as new friends to share a meal with, but as a potential military ally against his rivals. And according to their own history, they showed up armed and ready for a potential conflict after hearing gunshots, not because they got an invite to a potluck.
And this quote from historian David Silverman just hits the nail on the head. It perfectly explains the problem with that simple myth. It creates this image that Native people just willingly handed over the continent, which completely erases the really difficult history of land theft, broken promises, and horrible conflicts that came next.
Because of this history, for many Indigenous people, Thanksgiving isn't a day of celebration at all. In fact, since 1970, many have observed it as a National Day of Mourning. It's a solemn day of remembrance for their ancestors and a protest against the erasure of their true history.
Understanding this perspective is absolutely crucial, and it leads us to a really big question, right? If that harvest festival in 1621 isn't the true origin of our modern holiday, then where did it actually come from? Well, the answer is a lot closer to our own time than you probably think.
The Thanksgiving we celebrate today wasn't born from a colonial feast, not at all. It was actually created out of a national crisis centuries later. This timeline just lays it all out so clearly. You see, the 1621 event happens, and then it's basically forgotten. Sure, George Washington called for a day of thanks once, but it wasn't an annual thing. The real game changer is in 1863 with Abraham Lincoln, and it doesn't even become official law until 1941. And we can actually thank one incredibly persistent woman for making this happen, Sarah Josepha Hale. She was the editor of a super popular magazine, and for decades, she campaigned to make Thanksgiving a national holiday, arguing that it could help bring a country that was tearing itself apart back together. And this is the key, right here in Lincoln's proclamation. He made Thanksgiving a national holiday, right in the middle of the Civil War, one of the darkest times in American history. His goal wasn't to celebrate pilgrims. It was about finding a moment of gratitude and trying to heal the wounds of the nation. It was created as an appeal for unity. So how in the world did we get from Lincoln's very solemn call for unity to the holiday we know today with all of the food, football, and family get-togethers? I mean, it really all starts with a meal, doesn't it? The modern holiday is totally built around the dinner table, and this plate is just iconic. Of course, turkey is the undisputed star of the show. But you gotta have the essential supporting cast, the stuffing, mashed potatoes, cranberry sauce, and you can't forget the pumpkin pie. And through the 20th century, all these other rituals just popped up and became part of the tradition. The Macy's parade became this huge national TV event. Football became absolutely essential to the day. We even got the very strange tradition of the president pardoning a turkey. And, of course, the holiday now kicks off the whole Christmas shopping frenzy. And you know what? The holiday is still evolving. The rise of Friendsgiving is a perfect example of that. It's a celebration with your chosen family, and it reflects that for a lot of people, community is just as important as biology. It just goes to show how the tradition keeps adapting to modern life. And while we might think of one classic menu, the food itself is actually incredibly diverse. Down south, you're going to find amazing cornbread dressing and sweet potato casserole. Up in New England, maybe some clam chowder to start. And out on the West Coast, the menus are often filled with fresh, farm-to-table ingredients and all sorts of multicultural flavors. So this all brings us back to a really tough but important question that I think a lot of us are grappling with today. How do we hold on to a holiday that's all about gratitude, while also being honest about its really complex and, yes, often painful past? There's no single easy answer to that. But maybe the holiday's real lasting value is exactly this, its ability to hold both gratitude for what we have and humility about how we got here, all at the same time. It's not about ignoring history, but about acknowledging the entire complicated journey. So maybe this year, the real question isn't just what we're thankful for, but also what history we choose to remember when we sit down at the table.